Hey guys, this is Red and Blue, your channel on YouTube for all things PSG in English. Please subscribe. Today, I want to talk about something. Yesterday we talked about Vitinha for a while, and then we talked about the Mercato and all of the players that PSG has to offload. Today we're less than 1 week away from the end of the Mercato now, and so I wanted to talk about the other side of things, which is really like looking at the market right now, looking at our team, looking at what we've been doing and talking about. If there's one player that we should bring in, who would that be? And I think there's a few different options that we're talking about. I think I want to talk about players who I think would be additive to the squad, who would really make a difference, who would justify and command like a relatively high transfer fee, at least in 3 out of 4 cases. And I want to talk about players who I think would be both relevant but also would make sense and would fit with Luis Enrique's style of playing, with Luis Campos' way of doing transfers, and so who I think would be a good fit for us. And I think as well, like what I've been trying to do is not only like look at the market, but also like look at our squad, and look at not only how we've been playing, but also like looking at the first 2-3 games of the season, what I expect Luis Enrique to go for this season and what we've seen him start to do in those games. And so in that context, there's a few things which really stood out to me. I think we've seen Doué play in midfield. We've seen in some cases like our 4-3-3 almost become a 4-2-3-1 with a number 10 or midfielder that plays higher up the pitch. We've seen Dembele go back to the right flank, potentially to make space for a more traditional number 9. So we've seen a few places, and then like in terms of the squad itself, like I've talked about this before, but I think for me, like one of the key things I've got in mind is that I do think we're still a little bit short when it comes to our midfield. And so like if we keep to the 4-3-3, we're a little bit short. If we drop to a 4-2-3-1, it's a question that moves to other places. And so this is the context and what I've got in mind as I'm putting together those options. I think in defense, I haven't really included anything because I think in central defense, we're now very well covered. And I think when it comes to the fullbacks, not only did I hear Luis Enrique say time and time again that he thinks his players are volatile enough to be able to cover those positions, and his midfielders in particular. And 2, I completely agree with that approach, and I think makes a lot of sense. So I'm not going to recommend the fullback when I know it's like not in the immediate priorities of the squad and not aligned with the way Luis Enrique is looking at his squad and looking at his player. So anyway, let's just, I think like what we'll do is that we'll go one by one through the candidates, and I can tell you, why I picked them and what I see and how I'm coming to it. First one is a big name. It's Alexander Isak of Newcastle. So if you've been living on planet Mars for the past months or so, he's been having an ongoing conflict with Newcastle. He's asked for his transfer and he wants to move to Liverpool. I'll say this again, he wants to move to Liverpool. The last time I did a video on him and why he would make sense for PSG, literally my comment section exploded with Liverpool fan telling me to shut up and that he's basically as good as a Red already. The reality is that at this point, they are having a very, very hard time finding a deal. Newcastle really wants to hold on to the player. The player has not made himself any favor by being really like difficult with Newcastle. Dropping some bad quotes in the media, refusing to talk with the club and to negotiate and so on. Liverpool on their side, they've made a couple of offers, but they've also already recruited a lot of players this year, including a striker already in Ekitike, who's been doing well for his first few games. And so, there's a word in which I still think exactly the same as I did when I did a video on the subject. There's a world in which ultimately, like, all of the parties are kind of best served by the player going to PSG. Player wants to leave Newcastle and he wants to go to a bigger club where he can win trophies. Obviously, we just won the Champions League and basically almost every trophy in world football, and we've got the pockets to make him a good offer. Newcastle doesn't really want to sell, but I expect if they sell, they want a high price and they'd rather not sell to a rival in the same division. Plus, we can sweeten the deal and include, a Colomwani in the deal. Let's talk about Ramos in the deal. Like, there's a few different ways of slicing and dicing it, which I think would make sense for Newcastle. And so for them, selling to Paris is kind of a lesser of evils. And then for PSG, and I think that's the interesting part, like I said, it does feel to me, looking at the first few games, that Luis Enrique is really looking at how he can keep evolving and having different options in terms of his line of offense. And whether that's going to a 4-2-3-1, having a more traditional striker, like we've seen Ramos, get some minutes and scoring a goal against Tottenham, then featuring as a starter against Nantes, and then like coming on the pitch as well against Angers. Clearly, it's not an option that's completely disappeared, which is interesting because all of the second half of last season was all about false nines. And yeah, now we're seeing more traditional nine come back into contention. So in that context, you get a player like Isak, you basically have, for me, like the top striker in the world in terms of being able to both execute a real 9 striker position, but also execute it in a way which would be aligned with Luis Enrique playing style. He's technical, he's fast, he can pass, he can dribble, he can drop back down a little bit and participate into the setup of the game. So he ticks a lot of boxes which would be Luis Enrique compliant. Very, very high fee, obviously, shouldn't be too much of an issue for us. But yeah, and the big question mark is, would the player be prepared to compromise? Because he said like he only wants Liverpool and he wants to go to Liverpool. So question marks there. But yeah, I think it'd be an interesting one. Second one, another player that we've talked about a lot, Rodrigo Mora of Porto, who's this, very, very young 18-year-old talent, this shooting star out of Porto and out of Portugal, who's really, like, in a few months, made a name for himself, created a lot of excitement around him. He's been talked about in the context of PSG for the better part of the summer, really. Obviously, a young Portuguese player. We've got quite a few of those who've been successful in PSG. We know he'd be interested in a move to PSG as well in that context. And, he's obviously a very talented young player. In terms of position, I think like that's where for me like the caveat lies, in the sense that it's essentially a false nine slash like half space kind of player. So he's not quite a winger. He's not quite a midfielder. False nine, but more in the context of having a partner to play off of. So yeah, like in the context of like maybe if we move to a 4-2-3-1, it'd be a very attacking option for that number 10 position. Which I don't know how that would go. If we play in a 4-4-3 with a 4-3-3 with a false nine, I don't think he'd be able to execute that on his own. I don't think he's got the physicality, even in the Champions League to be sure, but then like even in Ligue 1, which is a physical league, I worry that he's still like a little bit young, a little bit like not as developed physically. He's quite short. He's not very big. So yeah, that'd be a big question mark for me. And I think in terms of volatility, I could see him developing into a few different positions and being able to cover in a few different places. But at the same time, right now, he doesn't have like that deep expertise of playing in different places, as far as I know. So yeah, he's more of a long-term project, but with the price tag of a starter already. So it's not the best equation and the best financial situation to be in. But yeah, he's a very exciting young player who, if we're looking at new options in terms of how we look at our offense, man, like he'd definitely be bringing something different to the field. And so, I think that's one that is, like I said, he's been talked about in PSG all summer. Most recently, apparently, he was in discussion with Saudi Arabia, with Al Ittihad, to go to Saudi Arabia, and apparently he's not close to that, and he'd be like pretty happy with it, actually. Which I hate. Like, I don't want to sound like high and mighty, but like that's kind of a negative for me. I think an 18-year-old like shooting star, a wonder kid from Portugal, he should have more ambitions than going to play in the Saudi league, even if he can make a lot of money there. So we'll see if this is real, if it's just like agents trying to get some headlines in the last few weeks of the Mercato. But yeah, he's got a release clause at 70 million euro. Apparently, Porto has been saying they're not going to negotiate anything under it. We'll see. The reality with Portuguese club is that usually there's always a little bit of negotiation anyway. But yeah, he's a pretty exciting, pretty expensive young player with a few options in front of him as well. Anyway, third one, another one that we talked about a lot when it comes to PSG, Magnus Akliouche of Monaco. He really fits, and he fits exactly with what we said we wanted at the beginning of the Mercato. At the beginning of the Mercato, we said, like, when it comes to our line of offense, we want a left-footed right winger who can do something a little bit different on the wing versus like what Doué can do. Dembele is not really a right winger anymore, or at least he wasn't at the beginning of the Mercato window. And we're talking about an exciting French young talent, like 24, 25. So he's not that young anymore, but he's got a few years of experience in Ligue 1. He played in the Champions League last season. He's a very gifted player, very technical, very exciting. And yeah, he's been like attracting a lot of attention. The issue with him is that Monaco's put a huge price tag on him at the beginning of the Mercato. They said they want 70 million euro for him, which is like, to me, that's crazy. That's the price that we paid for Kvara. And, as much as I think he's a great player, he's nowhere near the level of Kvara. So 70 million is insane. And obviously, like throughout the whole Mercato window, it's kind of killed any conversation in the shell before they can start happening. There's been a few clubs which have been sniffing around him. Most recently, Tottenham. I think like Bayer Leverkusen has looked at him. So there's been like a few options here and there. PSG as well. But everyone has made the same kind of like takeaway on him, which is, yeah, exciting player, but 70 million is just not realistic. And I think for us, I think our needs in terms of the kind of players that we've been looking at have evolved throughout the window. And I think the tactical takeaways that I was listing for the first few games don't really like point a finger at his profile being as important to add as we thought it was at the beginning of the window. And, in the context of Dembele playing on the right again, in the context of Doué becoming really like a first team player, in the context of Barcola being able to cover there, in the context of Mbaye having played there against Nantes, there's a lot of different options that we have already on the right. And so I wonder if this is really like the kind of profile that would be, the top of our list if we really have to focus on one. I don't know. It might be. I think for Akliouche, ultimately, like the reality of that conversation is not so much like who would be that one player that we'd take if we have to add only one. It'd be like if Kang In Lee leaves, then all of a sudden, like his profile becomes that much more interesting. And I think that's how I'm looking at him. It's more in context of, if tomorrow we get a crazy good offer from England for Kang-in Lee and we agree to let him go, all of a sudden, Magnus Akliouche, he could be a good option. We know he's interested in PSG. We know we've talked with him, so there's probably 80% of the deal with the player is already made, I would expect, if not more. And so it'd be more in terms of finding a deal with Monaco, which might be tough. But I expect that be the number one solution that we would go to in that context. Cool. And then the last one, which I haven't mentioned before, is a player of Barca named Marc Casado, who's also really blown out into the world stage last year. He played the first half of the season as a starter within the Barca team as a defensive midfielder. He's a La Masia player who's 21 years old. So he's young, very talented, a Barcelona academy player, so technically gifted. He knows how to pass the ball around. He's very good with his feet. He's very intelligent with his head. And I think, for me personally, I've been thinking that in the context of the current squad, if there's one place where we're missing a little bit of depth, would be in midfield, and specifically in defensive midfield. Where I think, obviously Vitinha is our starter and he's one of our best players, but we don't have a natural substitute for Vitinha who can step in, play some games, come in at the 70th minute if we need something a little bit different. If we don't want to play Vitinha, then all of a sudden we've got to move either Ruiz or Joao Neves into this space, or even Warren for that matter. None of whom are really a perfect fit in this position. Obviously, you can never exactly replace a player like Vitinha. It's like Hakimi. Those players are just too good and too great at what they do that you cannot find a substitute who would be anywhere close to the same level. But I think in this context, bringing in a younger player who we can keep developing, who's already at a certain level, but that we can keep developing, who'd be satisfied with not necessarily getting 100% of all of the game time, I think would make a lot of sense. A few weeks ago, I talked about Gavi from Barcelona, who I still think would be an even better option. But he had a great summer prep, and I think he's very keen to stay, and Barca isn't keen to sell him. So that option, I think, disappeared a little bit. I'd still rate him over Casado, but I've got to be realistic as well. I think Casado on the other end, is basically Barcelona is open for a transfer. They want 30 million for him, which is really not that much in the grand scheme of things. Aston Villa is looking at him, and there's a few clubs in England who are looking at him. He's been talked about for Marseille, but honestly, I don't see how they make that work financially. And, I think he's already too good for Marseille, even as a starter. But so I think it could be an interesting option. Barca is keen to sell. They're keen to sell at a relatively reasonable price. They need that to put their finance back in order one more time. So we could snoop in and just get the player, not too expensive. He's a replacement for Vitinha. He can develop. We can push him into different places. If he's really that great, we can always move Vitinha a little bit further up on the pitch and maybe into the Fabian Ruiz position, which he used to have up until a year and a half ago. And so another option really, and I think an interesting one. So anyway, those are the four names that I had for you guys. And some are more on the dream side of things. Some are more realistic. But I definitely I want to hear from you guys as well. If PSG can only make one last signing, who do you think it should be? Is it a name that's on my list? Do you have another idea? Who would you pick? Tell me in the comment below. And we can get a conversation started around this. And then for me, just to give you my final opinion, I think if I only have to pick one for this list, I'll go for the dream. I'll go for Isak. I think we're talking world-class player who I think would bring something very, very different from our offense. I do worry that all of our attackers aren't goal scorer primarily. Even if Dembele has made like huge strides at it last year, even if Barcola has had a great first half of the season, even if Doué has shown a few times that he can really bang one in, and even if Ramos, like from the bench, can score some goals, yeah, I don't know. I think we could use a bit of an additional weight in offense. Someone who can bang in like 30, 40 goals in a season, who can still play in the context of a Luis Enrique team as well. So it's not like, taking something but ignoring the other half. And yeah, we can move back Dembele to the right wing, rekindle the association with Hakimi, which I think would be really exciting. Have Doué be more of an option in this like number 10, number 8 position, which he's played before. He's played in Rennes, and I think he's. I'm a big fan of a very simple thing in football, which is like you put your best player in the position where they can do the most good. And I think Dembele on the right, that's where he's most natural. Yes, he's not going to score as many goals, but I love the havoc that he can create with Hakimi. And Doué in the middle, in a really like number 10, like game organizer, dribbler, a la Neymar kind of position. Yeah, I'd love to see that, man. That'd be exciting, and that'd be like, imagine like if you're a defense and we play against like, I don't know, Liverpool, an Arsenal, a Barca, and so on, like really the top European team. How do you defend when you've got like Isak, who's like playing with your central defense, and then like 2 meters behind that, you've got Doué, who can just like dribble 4 players. Dembele is on the right, Vara is on the left. Like you've got Barcola ready to step on the pitch, you've got Ramos ready to step on the pitch. Like that's a really, really, really solid line of offense. And something which I think, yeah, like it'd be a great new options to have for us, in great evolution of our game. So that would be like my personal choice. Let me know in the comment what you think. Who would you pick? Please drop a like on this video as well. Please drop a comment. Please subscribe to the channel. I mention it every time, but yeah, like really, like do subscribe, do hit the bell to get notified of future videos. And don't forget, like in Mercato, even when the Mercato is ending, it's always ici c'est Paris.